Continuing from the previous episode 352. Chapter 1281. Miserable End. Xiao Yan was startled initially when he heard that sharp scream from old ghost Jai Xing. Immediately, his heart abruptly turned cold. The Hall of Soul actually still had some experts hidden in this place? Moreover, the status of this person was actually such that even old ghost Jai Xing, who was a Hall of Soul Tianjun, had to address as Sir. Looks like the Hall of Soul has indeed come prepared. This thought flashed past Xiao Yan's heart. A fierce glint appeared in Xiao Yan's flickering eyes. Regardless of what the case was, he should kill this old ghost Jai Xing, who had repeatedly opposed him, before deciding on anything. Kai, a desire to kill surged within his heart. The speed at which the black light sphere spread suddenly quickened. The frightening suction force that was within close proximity shocked old ghost Jai Xing until his soul scattered. That horrified sharp cry became increasingly mournful. Trash, you have been turned into such a state by a younger generation. What face do you have to be a Tianjun of the Hall of Soul? Just before the light sphere was about to reach old ghost Jai Xing's body, an indifferent and completely emotionless voice suddenly resounded slowly in the sky. Soon after, a crack line was swiftly formed in the space behind old ghost Jai Xing. A blue figure slowly walked out. With the appearance of this figure, the air in this entire place immediately became moist. Some faint tiny raindrops spluttered and poured downwards from the sky. This mysterious change naturally attracted Xiao Yan's attention. Immediately, his heart sank. This person was actually able to rely on his vast and mighty Do Qi to stir the change of the natural energy around him. Such a strength was really shocking. Based on Xiao Yan's guess, it was likely that this so-called 9th Tianjun had likely reached the 7-star or 8-star level. The indifferent voice might cause old ghost Jai Xing's face to be ashamed, but it was obvious that his life was even more important than his face. He hurriedly cried out, "Sir, save me!" The blue figure glanced faintly at Xiao Yan. After which, he knitted his pale blue eyebrows. He watched the black light sphere that rapidly spread over and muttered, "It is actually a Tian-class Do technique." How envious. The blue-clothed figure swung his sleeve after uttering those words. The raindrop that scattered throughout the sky began to gather at a shocking speed. Within a short moment, it had gathered into a fast-rotating rain scene in front of old ghost Jai Xing. At the same time, his palm grabbed old ghost Jai Xing's shoulder and pulled back in a lightning-like manner. Seeing that this person wished to rescue old ghost Jai Xing, a chillness surged within Xiao Yan's eyes. The Do Qi within his body was poured out crazily, and the speed at which the black light sphere spread also increased. Within a blink of an eye, it had collided with the rain curtain. Crash! The two collided and the rain curtain immediately collapsed. Those rain droplets that permeated the sky were completely swallowed into the light sphere. The black light sphere broke through the rain curtain. Its speed increased instead of decreasing. After which, it quickly gave chase in front of old ghost Jai Xing's terrified eyes. The black light sphere directly reached old ghost Jai Xing's legs. Ah! When the black light sphere reached him, an extremely miserable scream was immediately erupted from old ghost Jai Xing's mouth. Humph! That blue figure also snorted coldly. He ignored the miserable scream of old ghost Jai Xing as he grabbed the latter's shoulder and increased the speed at which he was pulling back. The blue figure's speed increased and fled for some distance with old ghost Jai Xing. He turned around and glanced at old ghost Jai Xing's legs, only to frown a little. At this moment, old ghost Jai Xing's legs were already completely broken. The spot where it broke was as smooth as mirror. Not even the slightest blood appeared. That manner was as though the blood from both of his legs were completely swallowed by the black light sphere during the momentary contact earlier. His eyes once again turned towards old ghost Jai Xing's face. It was already as pale as snow. Even his breathing had become a little sluggish. Having lost both legs and an arm, this old ghost Jai Xing could basically be considered half-crippled. What an overbearing Tian-class Do technique. A slight solemnness drew past the blue figure's face. Immediately, he shook his head. His toes pressed on the empty air and his body pulled back rapidly. Even with his strength, he did not wish to forcefully receive the great heaven creation palm. Even if he could receive it, it would cause him some losses. This was not something that he wished to see. Even if you wish to leave, you will have to leave that old ghost behind. Xiao Yan laughed coldly when he saw the blue figure's fast speed. He suddenly clenched his hand. Vast and might Do Qi spread. That black light sphere's speed was also raised to its limit. It emitted a swoosh sound and spread with lightning-like speed. After which, it chased old ghost Jai Xing, whose shoulder was grabbed by the blue figure, with a swift lightning-like speed that one could not react fast enough. Finally, it struck the chest portion of the latter in front of his incomparably terrified eyes. Kai! A soft sound appeared. Old ghost Jai Xing widened eyes instantly solidified. Fresh blood slowly seeped out from the corner of his mouth. His face was as shriveled as a withered tree. His life force had completely vanished in the blink of an eye. The light sphere swallowed the area below old ghost Jai Xing's chest and finally ceased extending due to it having reached its limit. Finally, it slowly vanished in front of countless number of horrified gazes. The blue figure had finally stopped the moment old ghost Jai Xing lost his life force. After which, his gaze coldly looked at the black light sphere that swiftly disappeared. Finally, his eyes paused on Xiao Yan at the middle of the light sphere. You are indeed worthy of being a descendant of Xiao Zhan. This venerable self is a little curious as to why you are able to reach the Do Zun level at such an age. Could it be the bloodline of the Xiao clan, which had already long been wasted, could be used again? The blue figure looked at Xiao Yan and spoke faintly. Xiao Yan did not reply. His gaze merely glanced at the old man in front of him. The old man was wearing a blue robe. Even his hair and eyebrows were pale blue in color. Both of his eyes appeared to be emitted an endless and mighty water affinity energy, causing one to feel a little absent-minded. This blue-robed old man might appear ordinary, but Xiao Yan understood that the strength of this old fellow was not any weaker than the ancient void dragon He Qing, whom he had met back then. It is likely not due to the bloodline. It was already incredible that this kind of wasted bloodline could groom an expert like Xiao Zhan. It is likely impossible to groom a second Xiao Zhan. That blue-clothed old man, who was addressed by old ghost Jai Xing as Ninth Tianjun, merely shook his head and muttered to himself in the face of Xiao Yan's silence. Wasted bloodline? Xiao Yan frowned slightly and felt some doubt within his heart. From the meaning of this old fellow's words, it seemed that the Xiao clan possessed a history that he was unaware of a long time ago. However, that whatever bloodline strength was something that he had never sensed even a little of during all these years. Other than relying on the flame mantra to swallow heavenly flame, the reason that he was able to reach his current level was because of the accumulation of his own effort. There was no credit for the whatever bloodline strength. It is fine if you have doubts. Someone will explain to you once you reach the Hall of Soul. Ninth Tianjun laughed faintly after having appeared to see through Xiao Yan's doubt. He glanced at old ghost Jai Xing, who merely had the area above his chest remaining. After which, he slowly shook his head. A rich blue energy spread out from his palm. It subsequently wrapped around the remainder of old ghost Jai Xing's body before transforming into a blue icy crystal. With a flick of his hand, the ice crystal shattered. With a bang, it was blasted into countless fragments. Old ghost Jai Xing's body also turned into dust. Although old ghost Jai Xing had failed in a number of missions and ought to be punished, the one who should carry out this punishment is not you. Therefore, you must take some responsibility for his death. Ninth Tianan's blue eyes looked at Xiao Yan and said. Xiao Yan laughed coldly. Do Qi swiftly surged within his body. The heavenly flame also began to agglomerate within it. He was prepared to use all of his strength to fight with this Ninth Tianjun. I am aware that you possess a fire lotus that is comparable to a Tian-class Do technique. However, this is insufficient. You will not get the chance to unleash such an attack in front of this venerable self. Therefore, you should just leave with this venerable self. My mission might be to bring you back alive, but you can be considered alive as long as you have a breath left. Ninth Tianjun gently flicked his long finger on his sleeve and spoke without expression. I don't believe it. Xiao Yan's eyes were narrowed slightly. He did indeed sense a kind of dangerous aura from Ninth Tianjun. However, this was insufficient to get him to surrender without a fight. His shoulders immediately shook and the green-red bone wings were extended. The wings were flapped and his body immediately pulled back explosively. Numerous afterimages appeared in the sky, causing one to be dazzled. Ninth Tianjun shook his head slowly when he saw Xiao Yan's body pulling back. The space beside him slowly became distorted and his body disappeared in a strange fashion. The pores all over Xiao Yan's body immediately stood up when Ninth Tianjun disappeared. However, his eyes had just blinked when he saw that blue figure was already less than 2 feet in front of him. This venerable self has said that these are useless. Ninth Tianan's face was still indifferent. His right hand drifted out gently and the water qi that permeated the sky gathered. Finally, it was accompanied by waves after waves of rich, dark and cold energy. It rushed over towards Xiaoyan with lightning-like speed. Ninth Tianan's palm flew over without warning. Xiaoyan's expression swiftly became grave. The purple-brown flame hurriedly gathered on his right hand. Finally, it transformed into a meandering fire dragon that collided heavily with Ninth Tianan's hand. Kai! The two collided. However, there was no earth-shaking sound. Heat and dark chillness interacted. It erupted into a dense white smoke and a sizzling sound resounded continuously. Bang! This interaction did not continue for long before a deep sound resounded within the fog. Immediately, a miserable figure staggered and flew out. Finally, it smashed heavily on a mountain wall. The frightening force directly caused an arm-thick crack line to climb all over the hard mountain wall. Grug! Xiaoyan rubbed away the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. He spat out the blood from his mouth as he looked at the blue figure in the sky with a gloomy expression. It was possible for him to put up a fight when facing old ghost Jai Xing. However, he actually did not possess the strength to retaliate in the hands of this Ninth Tianjun. Leave with this venerable self. Ninth Tianjun in the sky glanced at Xiaoyan. His body moved and he appeared in front of the latter. His palm was slowly extended and grabbed onto Xiaoyan's shoulders. An indifferent voice was slowly emitted. Xiaoyan stared intently at Ninth Tianjun, who had extended his hand over. A ruthlessness flashed within his eyes. Just when he was about to unleash all his strength and risk his life to attack, a hand was extended from behind him. It calmly grabbed Ninth Tianjun's hand. At the same time, a faint elderly voice also quietly spread from behind. You, Ninth Tianjun alone, is really unqualified to bring him away. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Continuing from the previous episode 353. Chapter 1282. Displaying one's great might. Ninth Tianan's expression changed slightly when his hand was being grabbed. This was because he discovered that at this moment, the circulating dou qi within his body became sluggish. The fog that was permeated with rain droplets also rapidly disappeared. This scene naturally caused some shock to surge up Ninth Tianan's heart. He suddenly raised his head, only to see an elderly figure suspended in the sky. That familiar face directly caused him to involuntarily exclaim, Yao Chen, your body. You have actually recovered your strength? Ninth Tianjun had discovered with a glance that the current body of Yao Lao no longer possessed that kind of illusory form like in the past. Clearly, it was an actual body. Moreover, the reason for his heart to sink rapidly was the frightening aura that filled Yao Lao's body. That aura was so strong that it caused even his heart to pound a little. Teacher? You have awoken? Xiaoyan hurriedly turned around during the time that Ninth Tianan's attack was blocked. He saw Yao Lao behind and a joy quickly surged onto his face. Yes. Yao Lao smiled slightly towards Xiaoyan. After which, he slowly said, Little fellow, you should go and help the others first. Leave him to me. Xiaoyan hesitated for a moment after hearing this before nodding his head. With his extraordinary spiritual perception, he was naturally able to sense that the aura of the current Yao Lao was extremely frightening. Such an aura was something that even Ninth Tianjun in front and He Qing from back then could not compare with. This aura could even be considered the strongest that Xiaoyan had ever felt during these years. Is this the strength of teacher at his peak? It is indeed very strong. No wonder he is able to possess that kind of reputation in the Central Plains back then. Xiaoyan sighed in relief within his heart. After which, he drifted backwards in front of Ninth Tianan's somewhat gloomy eyes. Yao Chen, do you think that you can fight with my Hall of Soul just because you have recovered your peak strength? Although Ninth Tianjun greatly wanted to stop Xiaoyan, he understood that the Yao Chen in front of him had once again returned to being that renowned Yao Zunjie from the past. Even with his arrogance, he must admit that his current strength was no match for Yao Lao. The Hall of Soul is not the strongest in the world. You have quite a number of powerful opponents. Some people are entangled until they do not dare to randomly attack. As long as certain people do not intervene, someone of your level is unable to threaten the old me. Yao Lao laughed faintly. However, his smile had a slight chillness to it. Today, The Hall of Soul had launched such a big campaign against us, and you have injured my only disciple. You must ultimately repay a little of this debt. Do you really think that this venerable self is afraid of you? Ninth Tianan's face was dark and cold. His hand had a layer of blue luster. Immediately, his arm was twisted in a strange manner and escaped from Yao Lao's restraint. He widened his mouth and a blue dough cheese spluttered out in all directions. It swiftly agglomerated into a huge beast that bare its fangs and banished its claws. It carried a rich energy pressure as its sharp claws directly charged towards Yao Lao. Yao Lao's expression remained calm in the face of the attack by Ninth Tianjun. His hand was extended before it clenched abruptly. The space in front of him collapsed almost instantly, and that enormous beast was directly broken apart. It transformed into water droplets that scattered in all directions. Bang! After destroying Ninth Tianan's attack with a palm, Yao Lao's hand aimed at the former across a great distance before slamming his palm forward. This palm had just slammed forward when the energy of this entire place immediately fluctuated intensely. An invisible large spatial hand directly blended into the space and rushed quietly towards Ninth Tianjun. Although the spatial large hand was quiet, Ninth Tianan's heart still sensed an extremely dangerous feeling. His hand seal changed hurriedly and a low cry sounded. The endless amount of icy cold energy from around him gathered and formed a 1,000 feet large blue water barrier. The large spatial hand violently landed on the enormous blue water barrier. Monstrous spatial strength spread at that moment and directly caused the space of this entire area to become distorted. The shocking momentum caused the expressions of quite a number of people to change drastically. Bang! The spatial strength swept apart. That seemingly strong and firm blue water barrier merely lasted for a moment before it emitted a bang and exploded in the blink of an eye. Immediately, a crushing rain fell mightily from the sky and smashed onto the sea of tree, forming a clear rattling noise. Groan. Ninth Tianan's body staggered after the blue water barrier was broken. His body was directly forced back by 100 over meters. A moan was also emitted from his throat. Clearly, this Ninth Tianjun had suffered some injuries during this first exchange with Yao Lao. This spectacular battle in the sky naturally attracted the eyes of those experts in the distance. Some of the experience could also be considered to be very experienced. Hence, they recognized Yao Lao with a glance. Immediately, numerous exclamations resounded over the place one after another. That person is Yao Zun-Jie, Yao Chen. He is actually still alive? Isn't it said that Yao Chen had lost his body and his strength is greatly reduced? Why is it now? With the recovery of Yao Chen's strength, it is likely that the great calamity of the Falling Star Pavilion this time around can be resolved. The reputation and strength of the Falling Star Pavilion will also soar immediately. Even the three valleys will not be able to contend with them. Quote, quote. Private conversations that were accompanied by some unknown emotion spread. Quite a number of people looked at each other. The expressions in their eyes were a little complicated. The return of Yao Zun-Jie Yao Chen to the Central Plains was definitely a big news. Some of the experts from older generations were deeply able to feel the influence that Yao Lao had on the Central Plains back then. Although many years had passed, no one was able to surpass Yao Lao in being the top alchemist on the Central Plains. Even the three great heads of the Pill Tower had no choice but to admit that they could not be compared to Yao Chen. At this moment, this top alchemist of the Central Plains, who had disappeared for many years, had once again appeared. The shock and ripple that it created would naturally be earth-shaking. Xiao Yan watched Yao Lao, who had completely taken the upper hand. He also revealed a faint smile. With Yao Lao having regained his peak strength, the Falling Star Pavilion will no longer need to worry about the Hall of Soul taking revenge in the future. After all, despite the Hall of Soul being strong, it was this great strength that caused it to possess many implications. Some of the peak experts could not randomly just attack. As long as these peak experts do not attack, the Falling Star Pavilion would be safe. Bang! Xiao Yan mused for a moment. A muffled sound was suddenly transmitted from the sky. Xiao Yan, whose heart sensed something, hurriedly raised his head. He frowned a little, only to see that the Sky Demon puppet was being continuously defeated under the continuous fierce attack by Black Tianjun. Even its hard body had some vague dent appearing. Clearly, with the strength of the Sky Demon puppet, it was a little too much for it to fight with Black Tianjun alone. Xiao Yan's eyes paused on the Sky Demon puppet for a moment before turning away. It turned towards the battleground between Qinglin and White Tianjun. He was a little startled when he first looked towards this place. The expected situation of Qinglin being defeated did not appear. All he saw was an extremely intense battle. The two figures violently collided with each other. Human figures flashed and a shocking energy ripple swiftly spread. This aura. It's that ancient heaven's serpent. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes slightly. He could sense that the aura of the current Qinglin was vaguely a little brutal. This kind of feeling was something that he had personally experienced at the cave back then. Hence, he immediately understood that Qinglin should have borrowed the strength of the ancient heaven's serpent's soul. Otherwise, with her strength, it was impossible for her to engage in such a fiery hot battle with White Tianjun even with the help of the triple jade green snake flower pupils. There should not be any danger as long as the black-white Tianins here are held back. With the strength of Old Feng's and Little Fairy Doctor's group, they should be able to block the other Hall of Soul experts from attacking. Xiao Yan's eyes flickered slightly. Since there was no problem on Qinglin's side, he should attack Black Tianjun. By joining hands with the Sky Demon puppet, it should be possible for them to delay this fellow until he cannot divert his attention. However, in this situation, the greatest number of deaths would still be the ordinary disciples of the Falling Star Pavilion. It would be bad if things drag on for too long. During the time that Xiao Yan was frowning because of this, Yao Lao in the sky appeared to have sensed something. He lowered his head and watched the star realm, which was permeated by a bloody scent. A cold glint flickered within his eyes. He clenched his hand and an enormous spatial hand was once again formed. A palm smashed towards Black-White Tianjun. How could the Black-White Tianins, who were engaging in an intense battle with the Sky Demon puppet and Qinglin, anticipate such a sudden attack? Hence, they only recovered their attention after the attack arrived. Their faces immediately turned ghastly white. The frightening spatial strength gave them an extremely dangerous feeling. Grug. The large spatial hand violently landed on the bodies of the Black-White Tianjun. After which, these two extremely powerful Tianins immediately spat out a mouthful of fresh blood in front of everyone's eyes. Their bodies fell from the sky like meteorites and violently smashed into the forest. 1,000 feet deep gully was formed. Seeing the Black-White Tianins, who were unable to even endure for one exchange, those experts in the distant ended up inhaling a breath of cold air. Bang bang bang. After sending the Black-White Tianins flying with a palm, Yao Lao once again flipped his palm a couple more times and continuously smashed them across the air. With the smashing of his palm, all of those Hall of Soul experts on the ground that came into contact with the enormous spatial hand would be blasted into a cluster of black fog almost instantly. Even their flesh were turned into dust. Under this slaughtering by Yao Lao, those experts from the Hall of Soul finally became terrified. In their panic, they fled in all directions. None of them dared to remain in the Star Realm for a moment longer. That ninth Tianjun had a gloomy expression upon seeing the terrible loss of the experts from the Hall of Soul. The situation had basically gone out of control with the appearance of Yao Chen. However, he was unwilling to simply give up in this manner. Yao Chen, you have just recovered your strength and will definitely have difficulty completely unleashing it. This venerable self shall just watch whether you can turn things around with your strength and rescue this Falling Star Pavilion. Ninth Tianjun inhaled a deep breath of air. His hands suddenly formed numerous dazzling seals with lightning-like speed. Following the change in his seals, the surrounding space also slowly fluctuated. Immediately a spatial crack line was slowly formed. The moment the spatial crack line was torn open, a bone-chilling monstrous aura was slowly being emitted from the crack line. Even 8th Tianjun is here, huh? Upon sensing this bone-chilling aura, Yao Lao's brows twitched slightly and softly muttered to himself. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Continuing from the previous episode 354. Chapter 1283. Ban, half, Sheng. The spatial crack line slowly spread and the icy bone-chilling monstrous aura also permeated the place. Immediately, a white figure finally slowly stepped out from the space. Finally, it appeared in front of the countless number of eyes. Ninth, it is expected that you have actually activated the spatial jade piece. The white figure slowly appeared as an indifferent voice sounded. Humph, stop being annoying. You should take a good look at the opponent this time around. Ninth Tianjun frowned and spoke in a deep voice. The white figure slowly raised his head when he heard Ninth Tianjun words. He had an old face and his hair was white. Even both of his eyes were dense white in color, causing one to feel a kind of extremely icy cold feeling. At a glance, he appeared just like a block of ice. Yao Chen, huh? The white figure's eyes paused on Yao Lao's body a short distance in front. He was slightly startled before he immediately seemed to have sensed something. A little ripple appeared in his white eyes. You have recovered your strength? The Hall of Soul is really well prepared. It is still not rest assured despite dispatching a 9th Tianjun. It has actually dispatched even you. Yao Lao glanced at that 8th Tianjun and spoke faintly. No wonder, with your strength alone, you are indeed no match for him. It seems that the loss from today's mission is quite great. 8th Tianjun's snow-white brows twitched a little. He glanced at those experts from the Hall of Soul fleeing into the distance before speaking. He has just regained a body. Although his strength has recovered, it will have difficulty reaching its peak. I alone might not be sufficient, but if the two of us were to join hands, it is not possible to tell just who will be defeated. 9th Tianjun's expression was slightly sinister as he said, You should not underestimate this old fellow. 8th Tianjun knitted his brows and said, Why? Are you afraid? We are the leaders of this mission. If it fails, it is likely that we will have difficulty accounting to the top, no? 9th Tianjun glanced towards 8th Tianjun when he spoke until this point. He continued, Moreover, you have once been defeated in his hands back then. It has been a sore point for you all these while. If you do not make an attempt today, it is likely that you will no longer have such an opportunity in the future. Hearing this, the hand of 8th Tianjun, which was fondling his beard, paused. Some fluctuating rose within his white eyes. A moment later, he nodded slowly and said, In that case, let's attack. I also really wish to know if the current Yao Chen is as mighty as the one back then. Relax, with us combining our strength, we will be able to fight even a 9-star Do Zun. Currently, Yao Lao had just obtained his body and will definitely be unable to use it with great familiarity. It is not bad for him to possess even 70 to 80% of his strength. 9th Tianjun laughed. Immediately, his eyes became stern. He clenched his hands suddenly and a vast and mighty fluctuation spread from his hand. Following the spreading of this ripple, the entire place quickly became moist. Rain droplets were formed out of nowhere. At a glance, they were densely packed together and appeared to stretch endlessly. Xiao Yan stood on the top of a mountain. He frowned slightly as he watched those raindrops in front of him. His hand grabbed one of them, only to be startled to find that the interior of this raindrop contained an extremely dense water affinity energy. Although this kind of energy appeared gentle and calm, it possessed an extremely strong erosion properties. Based on Xiao Yan's guess, if this droplet of strange raindrop was to be shot over at great speed, it would likely be easily able to penetrate through the Do Qi defense of an expert Do Huang. Just one droplet alone possessed such a terrifying destructive strength. Just how terrifying the destructive strength would be should the densely packed endless raindrops in the sky gather together. It is said that the advancement of every star in the Do Zun class would cause one's strength to soar greatly. These words are indeed true. Xiao Yan softly muttered. He currently had the strength of a 2-star Do Zun. After unleashing the Skyfire 3 mysterious change, he was only able to reach the strength of a 4-star Do Zun. Moreover, this was because the materials he used to unleash the Skyfire 3 mysterious flame were 3 types of heavenly flames. If it was some other flames, it was likely that he would not even be able to raise his strength by 1 star. Moreover, despite Xiao Yan having reached the strength of a 4-star Do Zun, he only possessed 2 methods to kill someone of Old Ghost Jai Xing's strength. One was to merge the Annihilation Lotus Flame with 4 heavenly flames. The other was to rely on the Tian class Do skill, Great Heaven Creation Palm, that he had learnt. Other than these, he no longer had any methods. From this, one could tell just how great the difference between the levels within the Do Zun class was. If one did not possess a special technique, it was quite difficult to fight across the levels. Yao Lao stood in the air in the distant sky. His eyes were calm as he watched the mysterious raindrops that spread across the sky. Any raindrop that appeared within 1,000 feet from him would explode the moment it was formed. At this moment, everyone's eyes, regardless of whether it was the disciples of the Falling Star Pavilion or the experts in the distance, were gathered in the sky. Everyone could tell that these 2 top experts within the Hall of Soul were preparing to unleash a truly earth-shaking attack at this moment. Gather! Ninth Tianan's expression was unusually grave at this moment. A sharp cry had suddenly sounded from his throat as the seals formed by his hands changed. After the sharp cry by Ninth Tianjun sounded, the mysterious rain droplets that filled the sky immediately shook. They immediately rushed explosively towards him amidst waves after waves of air-splitting, swoosh, sound. Finally, it swiftly agglomerated in front of Ninth Tianjun. Within the blink of an eye, 1,000 feet large azure rain ball had slowly appeared. The rain ball was enormous. It was completely blue in color. While it rotated slowly, the monstrous energy that spread from it caused the expressions of quite a number of people to turn ashen. If this energy was to explode, it was likely that this mountain range would be racked and flattened in an instant. When the rain ball was formed, 8th Tianjun by the side also inhaled a deep breath of air. He raised his hand and pointed towards the rain ball from a great distance. Dense white chilling air suddenly spluttered out from his hand. Finally, it adhered onto the rain ball. Crack, crock. The dense white ice swiftly spread apart upon making contact with the rain ball. Within a short moment, that blue rain ball had become an enormous ice ball. Moreover, the energy that it contained within it was also becoming increasingly frightening. The strength of a Do's skill that two elite Hall of Soul experts joined hands to unleash was sufficient to shatter even one's soul. Things has become a little out of hand this time around. Those experts in the distance looked at the enormous ice ball in the sky. The terrifying energy fluctuation that spread from the ice ball caused even their souls to feel pressured. While their face was pale, these people also began to withdraw. If such a frightening energy was to explode, the entire mountain range would be flattened. They would likely also be buried with this place. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The expression of Feng Zun-Jie's group within the Falling Star Pavilion was solemn as he watched those experts swiftly pulling back. From the looks of the energy contained within this ice ball, it was likely already too late to escape even if they started running now. Yao Kem, back then, this venerable self was defeated in your hands. I wonder if you have the ability to block this combined attack of the two of us today. 8th Tianan's face had become a little paler after he turned the rain ball into an ice ball. Clearly, this attack had exhausted quite a great amount of his strength. Yao Lao merely twitched his eyebrows in the face of the loud cry by the 8th Tianjun. There was little emotional fluctuation on his face. It was as though the enormous ice ball that could destroy the mountain range did not exist. Humph, I want to see just how long you can try to act brave. 9th Tianjun involuntarily laughed coldly in the face of this calmness by Yao Lao. Both of his hands formed numerous seals with lightning-like speed. A moment later, his face suddenly reddened. A mouthful of fresh blood was spat out and shot onto the enormous ice ball. An explosive cry suddenly sounded. Rain heaven erosion. A cry that was filled with an incomparable dominance resounded over the sky. 9th Tianjun duo suddenly pushed forward with their hands. The enormous ice ball shook for a moment before it began to rotate rapidly. Finally, it rushed explosively towards Yao Lao with lightning-like speed amidst a deafening rumbling sound. During the time that the ice ball rushed forward, a frightening energy ripple spread from it. Every inch of the surrounding space crumbled. 1,000 feet large dark black spatial crack line appeared from the empty space like a black ribbon. Seeing the destructive strength of the ice ball, those fleeing experts were completely terrified. They went all out to increase their speed as they rushed out of this mountain range. Xiao Yan's expression was grave as he watched the enormous ice ball from the mountaintop. Immediately, his eyes paused on Yao Lao, who had not even moved. His heart sighed in relief after seeing the latter's expression. What a frightening attack, Pavilion Chief. Can he block it? All the disciples of the Falling Star Pavilion were extremely tensed at this moment. In the face of this terrifying strength, even this entire mountain range had become exceptionally small. At such a moment, all that they could do was to place their hope on Yao Lao. Today, you and the Falling Star Pavilion shall be destroyed under the combined strength of the both of us. A wild and heated expression surfaced in the eyes of 9th Tianjun and 8th Tianjun when they saw the frightening ice ball becoming increasingly closer to Yao Lao. When the ice ball entered 1,000 feet from Yao Lao, the latter finally slowly raised his hand in front of the countless number of gazes. An icy cold smile involuntarily surfaced on the faces of 9th Tianjun duo when they saw that Yao Lao was actually thinking of forcefully receiving this ice ball. Stop, however, The smiles of the two had just appeared when it suddenly stiffened under the subsequent faint voice. The soft cry was slowly spread from Yao Lao's mouth. Immediately, everyone was stunned to see that the fast-rotating icy ball suddenly stilled when it was still some distance from Yao Lao. The entire mountains was deathly silent. That ninth Tianjun duo had a dull expression at this moment. Their combined attack was something that even an expert at the peak of the Do Zoom class could not stop as he pleased. Yao Lao's hand was gently inserted into the enormous ice ball. His calm water-like voice slowly resounded over the sky. The current me is indeed unable to unleash my full strength. However, it is more than enough to deal with the two of you. This is because, upon speaking until this point, an expression of a cat teasing a mouse suddenly appeared on Yao Lao's face. The current me is no longer at the peak of the Do Zoom class. Instead, it is Ban Sheng. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Continuing from the previous episode 355. Chapter 1284. Saint Yao, Yao Chen Ban Sheng. These two simple words were undoubtedly like a furious thunder that suddenly blasted violently beside the ears of 9th Tianjun and 8th Tianjun. At this moment, it appeared as though the Do Qi within their bodies had ceased circulating. They widened their mouths. Their faces were dull as they looked at the old man in the distance, who had stopped the enormous ice ball with a single hand. Ban Sheng. Perhaps other people might find this level extremely unfamiliar. However, 9th and 8th Tianjun were quite familiar with it. This was because this level was called an abyss of despair by many experts at the peak of the Do Zoom class. Most of the experts in this world who had reached the peak of the Do Zoom class ended up halting at the edge of this Ban Sheng class. Regardless of how they trained, they were unable to truly step into this so-called Ban Sheng class. Only by stepping into the Ban Sheng class would one be able to possess the qualification to step into the Do Sheng class. One could even say that Ban Sheng was the most important foundation stone before one stepped into the Do Sheng class. If one was unable to enter the Ban Sheng level, one could forget about ever becoming a genuine elite Do Sheng. While Do Di was gradually becoming a legend that existed only in history, the simple Sheng word represented the peak of this entire world. An elite Do Zoom could be considered to be top experts of this continent. However, the top ultimately did not represent the peak. The peak of this world belonged to those experts of an even higher class. Similarly, this so-called Ban Sheng level was also a state that 9th and 8th Tianans had dreamed about. However, their hearts understood just how difficult it was to reach this level. Perhaps they might not be truly able to reach it even if they were to use their entire lifetime. They had never expected that Yao Lao was able to step into that class. From the way they thought of it, even if Yao Lao had regained a new body, it was already extremely difficult for him to recover to his peak strength, much less break through the peak of the Do Zoom class and advance to a Ban Sheng. Although they had never expected it, reality was extremely cruel. The situation that they had least expected had appeared in front of them as reality. Ban Sheng. All the eyes within the star realm gathered onto that elderly figure in the sky. Compared to that incomparably large ice ball, this figure appeared exceptionally tiny. However, at this moment, the pressure that was emitted from this small figure caused even the frightening energy that spread from within the icy ball to tremble a little. Ban Sheng, this old fellow, has actually advanced into that stage. Feng Zunjie and the others were stunned as they watched the figure. It was a long time later before a wild joy finally surged into their hearts. Ban Sheng. Although there was a Ban half word, it was still related to the Sheng word, which represented the peak. This was a transforming leap. The falling star pavilion is about to prosper. Those many experts, who were originally fleeing, had also come to a halt because of the scene in the sky. Some of the knowledgeable experts felt their mouths become dry. The falling star pavilion had produced a Ban Sheng. This seemingly explosive news would likely sweep throughout the entire Central Plains like a hurricane. The reputation and strength of the falling star pavilion in the future would likely soar in a frightening manner within a short period of time. The Hall of Soul might be frightening, but the falling star pavilion in the future was no longer something that they could destroy just because they wanted to. An expert at the Ban Sheng class was someone that even the Hall of Soul must treat seriously. Most importantly, this elite Ban Sheng was also the top alchemist in the continent. His reputation and influence was likely something that no one could compare with. Hence, at this moment, everyone understood that the Falling Star Pavilion was going to prosper. Xiao Yan had a joyous face as he stood on the mountain top. Yao Lao's breakthrough from the peak of the Dozun class and advancement to the Ban Sheng level had far exceeded his expectations. Although the ingredients that he had chosen to refine Yao Lao's body with this time around were all of top quality and that he had even added a Do Sheng arm at the end, he did not expect that it could eventually allow Yao Lao to break through. Originally, based on his expectations, Yao Lao's ability to recover his peak strength was already an extremely joyous matter. As for breaking through the Dozun class, that kind of matter was something that was not given much thought. This was because the difficulty of breaking through the Dozun class was something that he also understood well. Although there were fewer elite Dozuns on this continent, their numbers were far from the point of being as rare as a phoenix feather or a unicorn horn. On the other hand, the legendary Do Sheng, even with Xiao Yan's experience, he had merely just seen a Do Sheng skeleton with a remnant soul imprint once. Of course, the currently Yao Lao could likely only be considered an elite Ban Sheng. Although Ban Sheng had a Ban half word, it was at the very least a Sheng. Yao Lao was suspended in the distant sky. His gaze was calm as he glanced at 9th Tianjun Duo far away. His hand, which was touching the ice ball, was slowly clenched. Crack! After Yao Lao clenched his hand, the surface of the ice ball that contained a terrifying energy suddenly became distorted. That appearance was as though there was an incomparably large hand violently pinching it. Shatter! The surface of the ice ball became increasingly distorted. A moment later, it finally emitted a crack sound amidst Yao Lao's faint voice and suddenly burst apart. When the ice ball burst apart, the terrifying energy storm immediately swept apart like a hurricane. However, the storm came to an abrupt halt after spreading to a certain distance. It was quietly destroyed. Gulp! Countless number of people violently swallowed a mouthful of saliva as they looked at the ice chips that slowly scattered down from the sky. That frightening attack, which could annihilate this entire mountain range, was actually resolved so easily. Yao Lao's sleeve did not even move a little. Is this the strength of an elite Ban Sheng? Many experts exchanged glances with another. They could see a deep shock from the other party's eyes. Such a strength had already far exceeded the Dozun class. It was indeed worthy of being a true peak strength. Groan. 9th and 8th Tianjun were affected when the ice ball was destroyed. Their bodies shook and a muffled moan was emitted from their throats. A trace of blood seeped out from the corner of their mouths at the same time. Even their aura had become a little chaotic. Clearly, Yao Lao had not only shattered the ice ball but had even directly caused quite a great amount of damage to their bodies. 8th Tianjun wiped off the blood trace from the corner of his mouth. His eyes stared intently at Yao Lao in the distance. Those eyes were filled with terror and unwillingness. Back then, he had once been defeated in Yao Lao's hands. It was unexpected that in this first meeting of theirs after that time, he would actually be defeated in Yao Lao's hands once again. Moreover, it was a truly miserable defeat. Ban Sheng. 9th Tianjun clenched his teeth. The envy in his eyes was basically about to be raised to a frenzy level. However, he was not an ordinary person. A moment later, he forcefully suppressed the emotion within his heart. A grayish-white expression surged onto his face. After having discovered Yao Lao's current level, he understood that the mission today could be considered to have truly failed. If Yao Lao was still at the peak of the Dozun class, 9th Tianjun might find it troublesome to deal with but would not feel helpless and despair. However, no one could expect that Yao Lao had not only recovered his peak strength but had even broken through the barrier that was regarded by most experts at the peak of the Dozun class to be an abyss of despair and finally advanced into the Ban Sheng stage. This was a class that was completely different from that of a Dozun. Although it was only Ban half Sheng, but even the combined strength of two experts at the peak of the Dozun class would have difficulty defeating him. There was an enormous gap between the two that one would have difficulty attempting to make up for. 8th, let's go. 9th Tianjun inhaled a deep breath of air. He decisively cried out to 8th Tianjun in a deep voice. Hearing the cry of 9th Tianjun, the fist of 8th Tianjun immediately tightened. His face was filled with an unwillingness. He has currently already advanced to a Ban Sheng. Even if the both of us were to join hands, we will not be a match for him. If you wish to remain behind and seek your own death, I will not join you. Ninth Tianan's expression sunk when he saw this. He chided furiously. Let's go. Fortunately, this 8th Tianjun was also not a reckless person. He also understood that there was no longer any chance to turn things around for this mission today. All he could do was to nod his head. He waved his hand and the space beside him was swiftly torn into a spatial crack line. Their bodies flashed and they rushed into this crack line. Since you have come, you should at least leave something. Yao Lao in the distant sky smiled faintly when he saw this situation. He extended his hand and violently clenched it while aiming at the spatial crack line across the distance. Boom! After Yao Lao clenched his hand, that spatial crack line immediately collapsed. An incomparable frightening wind directly penetrated through the space and rushed into the spatial crack line. Two low and deep muffled sound were vaguely emitted. Grug. Two bright red blood arrows shot out from the crack line after the muffled sound appeared. After which, it rushed towards Yao Lao with a swift lightning-like speed. However, they automatically turned into a cluster of bloody fog that scattered away when they reached 1,000 feet from Yao Lao. Yao Zunjie, just you wait. My Hall of Soul will not simply take this lying down. While blood arrows scattered, the distant spatial crack line also slowly disappeared. However, the furious roar of 9th Tianjun penetrated through the air and reverberated over this place. The pain contained within the roar indicated that Yao Lao's earlier palm had hurt him quite badly. Yao Lao smiled slightly in a non-committal manner in the face of this roar. Having advanced into the Ban Sheng stage, he could be considered to have stepped into the peak level of the continent. The current him was no longer the Yao Zunjie from back then. Perhaps, the current him could have another form of address like Saint, Sheng, Yao, Yao Chen. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Continuing from the previous episode 356. Chapter 1285. Meeting old acquaintance Yao Lao looked towards the spot where 9th and 8th Tianans had disappeared. A moment later, Yao Lao finally withdrew his eyes. He glanced at the distant experts but did not pay much attention to them. He turned around and landed beside Xiao Yan. His brows were involuntarily knitted slightly when he saw the mess within the star realm. Although he had stopped the attempt of the Hall of Soul to destroy the faction, the Falling Star Pavilion had also lost some disciples to death. If it is not because I have just advanced to a Ban Sheng and my foundation is unstable, I would have buried those two with everyone who had died. Yao Lao sighed. His tone had some murderous intent surging within it. Teacher need not be concerned about it. If it is not because of your intervention today, it is likely that the Falling Star Pavilion will really suffer from a great calamity today. Xiao Yan smilingly said, Oh, it is all thanks to you. Otherwise, forget about Ban Sheng, even recovering to my peak strength would be extremely difficult. Yao Lao smilingly said. His smile was quite a happy one. Old fellow, congratulations. During the time that Yao Lao was chatting with Xiao Yan, Feng Zunjie had also led the others to swiftly rush over. He cupped his hands towards Yao Lao from a great distance away and said. Yao Lao smilingly shook his head. He spoke softly, give instructions to take care of the mess. It is likely that the Hall of Soul will not dare to easily come and attack again. Feng Zunjie nodded. With an elite Ban Sheng present, it was likely that the Hall of Soul would also understand that it was pointless for an ordinary expert to come. When it came to a Ban Sheng class expert, it was likely that even the Hall of Soul could not simply dispatch them as it desired. Quite a number of spies from various factions has come today. Perhaps it would not be long before news that you have reached the Ban Sheng class spreads throughout the Central Plains. This is not a bad opportunity. With you around along with your reputation as the top alchemist in the continent, it is likely that some of the old demons with some friendship with us will not reject our invitation. Feng Zunjie voiced his thoughts. Yao Lao nodded slightly. The foundation of the Falling Star Pavilion was too shallow. Even amongst the 4 pavilions, it could be considered to have been founded for the least amount of time. Although he had currently advanced to a Ban Sheng, there were not many experts in the pavilion who could hold their own. One must not lack such characters if one wished to strengthen a faction. Fortunately, Yao Lao was currently not only a Ban Sheng but also held the title of the top alchemist in the Central Plains. This was an incomparably glittering golden nameplate. As long as word was spread, it was likely that quite a number of genuine experts would take the initiative to come. At that time, the Falling Star Pavilion could truly be considered to be strengthened. After the withdrawal of the Hall of Soul, the Falling Star Pavilion, which had experienced an intense big battle, gradually became peaceful during the subsequent days. During this peacefulness, the Central Plains had turned into a great uproar because the Falling Star Pavilion had produced a Ban Sheng. Everyone understood what an elite Ban Sheng represented. This kind of expert was something that even the Pill Tower did not possess on the surface. On just this point alone, it was sufficient to greatly brace the reputation of the Falling Star Pavilion. This was especially the case when everyone knew that this elite Ban Sheng was also the top alchemist on the continent. This kind of reputation was magnified limitlessly. Hence, the Falling Star Pavilion had suddenly become lively after 3 days of peace. The leaders of various factions and some experts from the older generations flocked over. Countless number of people came to visit every day. This scene was a completely different one from how their doors were empty in the past. Amidst this liveliness, some experts, who once had some relationship with Yao Lao and Feng Zun Jie, also finally accepted the invitation to become a guest elder of the Falling Star Pavilion. Although this name was a little empty, they were indeed pulled onto the same boat as the Falling Star Pavilion. While the entire Falling Star Pavilion was busy and lively, Xiao Yan did not participate much in the activities. He had never liked this kind of interaction. Hence, after the day the Hall of Soul retreated, he had chosen to undertake a retreat in the stone tower at the back mountain to train. Although with Xiao Yan's age, he was already considered to be the outstanding amongst the outstanding people of his generation by being in possession of such a strength, it was insufficient to satisfy him. With his increased interaction with the Hall of Soul, he also began to increasingly sense just how terrifying this faction was. A 2-star Do Zun strength did not provide him with the qualification to fight with them. Although the Falling Star Pavilion was becoming stronger under Yao Lao's management in order to become Xiao Yan's firm support, Xiao Yan also understood that there were some matters that he still had to rely on himself. Hence, he did not dare to be lazy when it came to training. Xiao Yan, who was seated on a stone platform at the top of the stone tower, slowly exhaled a breath of air. His shut eyes were also slowly opened. A smile surfaced on his face when he sensed the surging Do Qi that filled his body. "Have you awakened?" The smile had just appeared when a warm laughter sounded from the side. Xiao Yan turned his eyes, only to see Yao Lao standing at the stone window of the stone tower with his hands behind him. His face was full of smiles. "Teacher, why have you come?" Xiao Yan was startled when he saw this. He hurriedly stood up and greeted him. "Old Feng is better than me when it comes to those matters. Like you, I do not really like such things. However, after suffering the loss from last time, I must establish a sufficiently strong faction this time around, regardless of how I dislike it." Yao Lao smilingly said. Xiao Yan smiled. He appeared to have recalled something and his finger rubbed the dark black ring. After which, he took it off and tossed it towards Yao Lao. He said, "Teacher, since you have already revived, it is time that this thing returns to its owner." Yao Lao was startled when he saw the dark black ring that drifted in front of him. A yearning emotion was revealed in his eyes. His finger rubbed the ring. A moment later, he said, "All the things that teacher has learnt in my life have been completely left behind in this ring. The current you has likely already learnt most of it. From a certain point of view, you have already reached the qualification to leave teacher. Keeping these things will indeed no longer be of much use to you." Yao Lao wore the black ring on his finger. Immediately, he changed the topic and laughed. "However, there is something that is of great use to you." Yao Lao's finger gently pressed the dark black ring after his words sounded. A cluster of dense white flames slowly curled and rose. Finally it was suspended in front of Yao Lao. It was surprisingly the bone-chilling flame. "Teacher?" Xiao Yan was startled when he saw this. "You practice the flame mantra. The heavenly flames are even more important to you. Now that I have advanced to a Ban Sheng, this bone-chilling flame is no longer of much use to me." Yao Lao's gentle eyes looked towards Xiao Yan as he said, "Teacher should stop fooling me. Now, I am no longer that ignorant youth from back then. It is impossible for me to take this bone-chilling flame." Xiao Yan smiled bitterly and shook his head. A heavenly flame is definitely a powerful weapon for an alchemist. Even though Yao Lao had become a Ban Sheng, possessing the bone-chilling flame would be like adding wings to a tiger. The so-called, "no longer of much use," was complete nonsense. Yao Lao helplessly shook his head when he heard this. His heart said that this young fellow was no longer that greenhorn from back then. However, This did not cause him to abandon his decision. Immediately, he ignored Xiao Yan and gently placed his finger on the cluster of bone-chilling flame. The latter immediately trembled intensely. A moment later, the shaking ceased. A paleness surfaced on Yao Lao's face. "Little fellow, I have already removed the spiritual imprint in the bone-chilling flame. However, this bone-chilling flame had been refined by me for many years. Even though the spiritual imprint had been removed, it will still possess quite a great resistance to you. Therefore, you will not be able to use the flame mantra to refine and swallow it for a short period of time. Otherwise, it is likely that you will incur its backlash." Yao Lao's hand gently rubbed the bone-chilling flame. After which, he smiled slightly. He flicked his finger and the latter gently drifted towards Xiao Yan before being suspended in front of him. "You should plant your spiritual imprint into it now and properly keep it within your bod. When it no longer possesses any resistance towards you, you can merge with it." Xiao Yan's eyes turned a little red as he looked at the cluster of dense white flame in front of him. This bone-chilling flame should be something that had accompanied Yao Lao for a long time. Yet, he had personally removed the spiritual imprint at this moment. With your current strength, you will perhaps not see an overly terrifying leap in strength even if you swallow it. A heavenly flame of the bone-chilling flame ranking might be a little inadequate for you. Yao Lao was somewhat regretful. Immediately, he urged, "All right, quickly plant your spiritual imprint." Xiao Yan laughed bitterly. Now that things was like this, he was not allowed to reject any longer. All he could do was to shut his eyes. His finger touched the dense white flame and a trace of spiritual imprint moved along his finger before slowly entering it. With the invasion of the spiritual imprint, the bone-chilling flame initially emitted some resistance from within it. However, it was currently without an owner. Hence, after a brief resistance, the resistance began to scatter. Xiao Yan's spiritual imprint was also successfully planted into it. The bone-chilling flame shook when the spiritual imprint was successfully planted. It swiftly turned into a fire glow that entered the pale white fire seal between Xiao Yan's brows. Xiao Yan immediately felt a warm feeling being emitted from his brows when the bone-chilling flame entered his body. If he carefully sensed it, he would discover that the bone-chilling flame merely lingered between his brows. It did not show any signs of entering his veins and gathered together with the 3000 lotus heart flame. Clearly, its resistance was the cause. Xiao Yan was indifferent to this. Such a resistance would disappear sooner or later. It was only a matter of time. "That's right, have you gathered all the ancient maps for the purifying demonic lotus flame?" Xiao Yan was depressed when this was mentioned. He shook his head and said, "Ever since I obtained that piece from the Black Corner region, I have not gained anything else. The purifying demonic lotus flame is too mysterious. Even I have never seen it. If it is possible to obtain a heavenly flame of this rank, the help it could provide you was far from what the bone-chilling flame could compare with. I will do my best to help you inquire about it during this period of time." Yao Lao voiced his thoughts. Xiao Yan nodded slightly. "Oh, that's right. There is an acquaintance who have come to the Falling Star Pavilion to look for you. Do you wish to meet her?" Yao Lao suddenly seemed to have recalled something. His expression was suddenly a little strange as he said, "Who?" Xiao Yan was startled when he saw this appearance. Nalan Yanran. Hearing this name, Xiao Yan frowned slightly. Given Nalan Yanran's character, she would likely not come looking for him for no reason unless something has happened to Yun Yun. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible.